The morning started like any other day in Seoul until the sky began to crack. Dr. Kim Minho was drinking his coffee at the university when he heard the screaming outside. He rushed to the window and saw something that made his hands shake so badly he dropped his mug. Giant ships were appearing in the sky like someone was tearing holes in reality itself. The vessels looked like nothing he had ever seen in his 20 years of studying physics. They seemed to be made of some kind of metal that shifted and moved like liquid, but solid at the same time. Strange lights danced across their surfaces, in patterns that hurt to look at directly. His phone buzzed with emergency alerts. Similar ships were appearing over major cities around the world: New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Delhi, all at exactly the same moment. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Dr. Park Suna burst into his office, her face pale with excitement and terror. She was the best xenobiology expert in South Korea, which meant she studied life forms from other planets. Though until today that had been purely theoretical work. "Minho, we need to get to the observation post right now," she said, grabbing his arm. "The government is setting up first contact protocols. They want us there as scientific advisors." The observation post was chaos. Military personnel ran everywhere, setting up equipment and shouting orders. Scientists from every field imaginable had been called in. Everyone was trying to understand what they were dealing with. The ships hung in the air without making any sound. That was perhaps the most unsettling part. Something that massive should have been roaring with engines or creating sonic booms. Instead, they floated as silently as clouds. Dr. Lee Kang-ho, the military's chief scientist, was frantically checking his instruments. "There's no energy signature," he muttered, adjusting his equipment again and again. "These things are the size of city blocks, but they're not showing up on any of our sensors. It's like they're not really there, except we can all see them." Dr. Park Suna was taking readings with her own devices. The electromagnetic spectrum is completely normal around them. No radiation, no heat signatures, nothing. Whatever technology they're using, it's beyond anything we understand. Then the voice came. It wasn't broadcast over radio or television. Instead, it seemed to speak directly into everyone's mind at the same time. The words appeared in perfect Korean for the Korean speakers, perfect English for the English speakers, and every other language for people around the world. "People of Earth," the voice said, with a tone that was both gentle and infinitely sad. "We are your descendants from the year 5000 AD. We have traveled back through time and space to find you. We have returned to free you from an ancient deception that has enslaved your species for thousands of years." Dr. Choi Hyun, the government's liaison for first contact situations, looked like he wanted to run away. He had trained for this moment his entire career, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it. The largest ship began to descend slowly. A section of its hull became transparent, revealing figures moving inside. Then, something that looked like a doorway simply appeared in the air near the observation post. The beings that stepped through were definitely human, but changed in ways that made everyone stare in wonder and fear. They were taller than normal humans, maybe 7 feet on average. Their skin had a subtle glow to it, and underneath you could see networks of light running through their bodies, like veins made of starlight. Their eyes were the most striking feature. They looked ancient, like they had seen the birth and death of civilizations. When they looked at you, it felt like they could see right through to your soul. The leader stepped forward with movements that seemed to flow like water. Everything about these beings suggested they had evolved far beyond normal human limitations. "I am Keeper Lee Ji-won," he said, and his voice carried strange harmonics that seemed to vibrate in their chests. "We are what humanity calls the Ascended. We come bearing a truth that will shatter everything you believe about your species and your history." Dr. Choi Hyun stepped forward, trying to maintain his professional composure despite his obvious fear. "These claims are extraordinary. We'll need proof before we can believe anything you're telling us." Keeper Ji-won's expression grew sad, like a parent having to explain something terrible to a child. "Your DNA contains genetic markers that could not have evolved naturally. Your lifespans have been artificially shortened from what they should be. Your minds contain barriers that prevent you from accessing abilities your ancient ancestors possessed as naturally as breathing." He gestured toward the sky where more ships were becoming visible in the distance. "And those who did this to your species who turned you into something less than what you were meant to be, are returning to Earth to claim what they consider their property. They are coming to harvest humanity. The observation post fell completely silent. Everyone stared at this being who claimed to be from humanity's future, trying to process what they had just heard. The idea that humans were not what they seemed, that they had been altered by some outside force, was almost too much to accept. But looking at these ascended beings, at their obvious advancement and their deep sadness when they spoke about humanity's condition, it was hard to deny that something extraordinary was happening. Dr. Park Sooner was the first to find her voice. If what you're saying is true, if we've been changed from our original form, then what were we supposed to be? Keeper Jiwon looked at her with something that might have been hope. You were meant to be free. The underground conference room beneath the Blue House had never seen anything like this. World leaders sat around a massive table, their faces illuminated by holographic images that defied everything they thought they knew about human history. President Kim Dae-ho kept rubbing his eyes, as if he could make the impossible visions disappear. Keeper Ji-won stood at the center of the room, his glowing neural pathways casting strange shadows on the walls. With a gesture of his hand, he conjured three-dimensional images that floated in the air above them. The first image showed Mars, but not the dead red planet they knew today. "This is Mars, as it was 12,000 years ago," Ji-won said, his voice heavy with ancient sorrow. The hologram showed a blue and green world with vast oceans and continents covered in strange cities. "Your ancestors built these settlements. They were not the primitive cave dwellers your history books describe." The image zoomed in on carved stone reliefs found deep in Martian caves. The figures depicted looked human, but they had the same network of glowing pathways beneath their skin that the Ascended possessed. They were shown floating in the air, moving massive stones with their minds and communicating without speaking. Dr. Park Sooner leaned forward, her scientific mind racing. "These carvings show humans with abilities we don't possess. How is that possible?" "Because you were changed," Ji-won replied, his expression growing darker. 10,000 years ago, your species was evolving naturally toward something magnificent. Humans lived for centuries instead of decades. Your consciousness could expand beyond your physical bodies. You could manipulate matter at the molecular level with focused thought. The holographic display shifted to show DNA sequences that made the geneticists in the room gasp. Dr. Kim Ji-hoon, South Korea's leading genetic researcher, stood up so quickly his chair fell over. "Those genetic markers," he whispered, pointing at the floating DNA strands. "I've seen them before in human samples, but we always assumed they were junk DNA left over from evolution. They're in every human being on Earth." "They're not junk," Ji-won said sadly. "They're locks, genetic chains placed on your species by beings who saw your potential and decided to harvest it for themselves." The room fell silent as Ji-won continued his terrible tale. "An alien coalition that called themselves the Shepherds had been watching your solar system for millions of years. They were old, ancient, beyond your comprehension, and they had turned the enslavement of younger species into an art form. A new hologram appeared showing beings that made everyone in the room shudder. The Shepherds looked like a nightmare fusion of organic and mechanical parts. Their bodies were assembled from pieces of dozens of different species they had conquered over the millennia. When they found early humanity developing psychic abilities and extended lifespans, they saw an opportunity," Ji-won explained. "But they didn't want to conquer you through war. That was too messy, too expensive. Instead, they decided to make you conquer yourselves." Dr. Choi Hyun, who had been taking notes frantically, looked up with confusion. "What do you mean, make us conquer?" "Ourselves." The holographic display showed ancient laboratories hidden deep beneath Earth's surface. Shepherd scientists worked on human subjects, their mechanical appendages moving with precise, horrifying efficiency. They captured thousands of your ancestors and rewrote their genetic code, Ji-won said, his voice filled with rage that had been building for millennia. They shortened your lifespans so you would never have time to fully develop your abilities. They implanted behavioral inhibitors that made you aggressive toward your own kind, ensuring you would spend your energy fighting each other instead of reaching for the stars. President Kim Dae-ho found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "They made us less than we were supposed to be?" "Much less," Ji-won confirmed. "But the cruelest part was the memory wipe. They erased all knowledge of what humanity had been. Your myths and legends about gods and magical powers, those are fragments of suppressed memories trying to surface. Your ancestors weren't worshipping gods. They were remembering what they used to be able to do themselves." Dr. Park Suna was staring at her own hands, as if seeing them for the first time. "The things we call supernatural or impossible, telepathy, telekinesis, healing with touch, those were normal human abilities?" "As normal as breathing," Ji-won replied. "The shepherds left your species just enough intelligence to eventually develop technology, but not enough wisdom to use it properly. They wanted you to build the infrastructure they would need when they returned." The hologram shifted again, showing monitoring stations hidden throughout the solar system. Some were buried in asteroids, others disguised as natural rock formations on distant moons. All of them were broadcasting data into deep space. "They left these watchers behind," Ji-won explained. "Automated systems designed to monitor your progress and alert the Shepherd fleet when you reached a specific level of technological development." Defense Minister Park Jong-ho leaned forward, his military mind focused on the immediate threat. "What level? What were they waiting for?" Ji-won's expression grew grim. "Quantum computing and faster-than-light communication, technologies that would make you useful as a workforce, but also dangerous enough that they needed to act quickly." The room erupted as the implications hit everyone at once. Dr. Kim Ji-hoon was the first to speak, his voice shaking. "We achieved quantum computing breakthrough 6 months ago, and just last week the university announced successful faster-than-light data transmission experiments." "Which means," President Kim Dae-ho said slowly, his face going pale, "they're already coming." "The Shepherd Harvester fleet detected your quantum signatures 6 months ago," Ji-won confirmed. "They've been traveling toward Earth ever since. Our long-range sensors detected them crossing into your solar system 3 days ago." Chaos erupted in the room. Some officials shouted that this had to be an elaborate hoax, that the Ascended were trying to trick humanity for their own purposes. Others demanded immediate military mobilization, though what good conventional weapons would do against beings who could manipulate matter with their minds was unclear. Dr. Choi Hyun slammed his hand on the table, hard enough to crack the polished wood. "Even if everything you're telling us is true, what can we possibly do? If these shepherds are as advanced as you claim, if they've been doing this for thousands of years, how can we fight them?" Keeper Ji-won smiled for the first time since entering the room, and his smile held hope that had been carefully guarded for millennia. "We didn't come here just to warn you about what's coming," he said quietly. "We came here to give you back what was stolen from your species. We came to break the chains the shepherds placed on humanity's true potential." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. These beings weren't just messengers bringing bad news. They were offering humanity a chance to become what they were always meant to be, but that transformation would come with a price that none of them could yet imagine. Dr. Park Suna stood in the medical bay of the Ascended ship, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it echoing off the strange metal walls. The room looked like something from a dream, surfaces that glowed with their own inner light, instruments that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch, and an atmosphere that made her feel like she was breathing liquid starlight. Her colleagues had begged her not to volunteer for this demonstration. Dr. Kim Min-ho had grabbed her arm just before she entered the ship, his eyes filled with worry. "We don't know what this will do to you," he had said. "What if you're not the same person when you come back? But someone had to be first. Someone had to take the risk to prove whether the Ascended were telling the truth about humanity's stolen potential." And as the team's leading expert on alien biology, Suna felt it was her responsibility. Keeper Ji-won approached her with a device that looked like a piece of crystallized lightning. It was no bigger than her palm, but it pulsed with energy that made her skin tingle just being near it. The crystal seemed to contain tiny storms of light that swirled and danced inside its transparent surface. "This is the awakening protocol," he explained, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. It will remove the genetic locks the shepherds placed on your DNA and restore your natural neural pathways. But I must warn you, once this process begins, there is no going back. You will never be the same person who walked into this room. Suna looked at the device, then back at Jiwon's ancient eyes. Will I still be me? Will I still have my memories, my personality, my feelings? You will be more yourself than you have ever been, he replied, but you will also be connected to things you never imagined. You will see the universe as it truly is, not as the shepherds wanted you to see it. She nodded and sat down in what looked like a chair made of solidified light. The moment she settled into it, the chair molded itself perfectly to her body, supporting her in ways that made her feel completely safe despite the terror of what was about to happen. Jiwon placed the crystal device against her temple. It felt warm, almost alive, like it was recognizing something in her that had been sleeping for thousands of years. "Are you ready?" he asked. Suna closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Do it." The moment the device activated, her entire world exploded into light and sensation. It felt like someone had opened a door in her mind that she never knew existed. Her consciousness suddenly expanded far beyond the boundaries of her physical body, reaching out to touch the quantum fields that ran like invisible rivers through all of reality. She could see the mathematical equations that governed the movement of atoms, feel the gravitational dance of distant stars, and sense the delicate balance of forces that held the universe together. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. But the most shocking change was happening to her body. Networks of light began appearing beneath her skin, tracing patterns that looked like the branching of lightning or the flow of rivers. The neural pathways were growing, connecting parts of her brain that had never communicated before. "I can feel everything," she whispered, her voice now carrying strange harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions she couldn't name. "I can sense Dr. Kim's worry from 3 blocks away. I can feel the janitor's boredom in the basement of the university. I can even detect the fear of the soldiers stationed outside this ship." Jiwon nodded, but his expression was troubled. "What else do you sense?" Suna paused, concentrating on the new flood of information flowing through her expanded consciousness. "There's something else, something artificial pressing against everyone's minds. It feels like invisible chains wrapped around their thoughts. The shepherd control frequencies," Jiwon said grimly. "They've been broadcasting subtle influence signals for months, preparing your species for harvest. Most humans can't detect them, but now that you're awakened, you can feel their presence." The implications hit her like a physical blow. "They're already controlling us, even now? Not controlling directly, but influencing, making humans more compliant, less likely to resist when the harvester ships arrive. The signals become stronger as they get closer to Earth." News of Suna's transformation spread across the world within hours, despite attempts to keep it classified. Videos of her demonstrating her new abilities, moving objects with her mind, healing cuts by touching them, and speaking directly into people's thoughts, went viral on every social media platform. The world's reaction was immediate and chaotic. The United States military demanded access to the Awakening Protocol to create super soldiers. China claimed the technology violated natural law and threatened to attack any nation that used it. Religious leaders were split, some calling it a divine gift, others declaring it demonic corruption that would damn humanity's souls. Dr. Kim Ji-hoon, the geneticist who had been studying the locked DNA sequences, published a paper confirming that Suna's genetic code had indeed been altered. The artificial limitations had been removed, allowing her DNA to express abilities that existed in every human being but had been suppressed for millennia. Meanwhile, protests erupted in major cities around the world. Some people demanded immediate access to the awakening process, while others formed groups dedicated to preventing what they saw as the destruction of human nature. Fights broke out between the two factions, and several governments declared martial law. In the midst of this chaos, the Ascended delivered devastating news. Their long-range sensors had detected an alarming change in the Shepherd fleet's trajectory. Dr. Kim Min-ho, who had been appointed to lead the human research team, burst into the command center of the Ascended ship. "They're coming faster than..." Expected, aren't they? Keeper G1's expression was grave. The shepherds detected the quantum resonance from Dr. Park's awakening. They know we're here, and they've accelerated their approach. Instead of months, we now have only weeks before they arrive. The weight of that timeline crashed down on everyone in the room. Weeks to somehow prepare humanity for beings who had been perfecting the art of conquest for thousands of years. "Can you awaken everyone at once?" Minho asked desperately. "Use the same process on all of humanity simultaneously." G1 was quiet for a long moment, his ancient eyes reflecting calculations that spanned millennia of experience. "Yes, it's possible. We could use quantum field resonance to broadcast the awakening signal to every human on Earth at the same time." "Then let's do it," Minho said immediately. "It's not that simple," G1 replied. "The process requires conscious acceptance from every individual. Even if a significant portion of humanity resists the transformation, the quantum interference could kill millions. Every human being on Earth would need to choose awakening willingly and simultaneously." The room fell silent as the impossible nature of their situation became clear. They needed to convince 8 billion people to voluntarily undergo a transformation that would fundamentally change what it meant to be human, and they had to do it before an alien harvester fleet arrived to claim Earth as their latest conquest. The fate of humanity now depended on the species' ability to overcome its divisions and choose evolution over extinction. The Morning Soul's sky cracked open for the second time. Nobody was prepared for what emerged. The Shepherd scout ships looked like something from humanity's worst nightmares, twisted masses of metal and flesh that seemed to writhe and pulse as they moved through the air. These weren't clean, elegant vessels like the Ascended ships. They were grotesque collections of organic parts and mechanical components, harvested from dozens of different species. Dr. Park Suna, now fully transformed with neural pathways blazing beneath her translucent skin, felt the ship's arrival like a physical blow to her expanded consciousness. But what terrified her most wasn't the ships themselves. It was what they were doing to the people below. "Something's wrong," she told Dr. Kim Minho through their quantum communication link. "The control signals are activating. I can feel them pressing against every human mind in the city." From her position on the Ascended command ship, she watched in horror as people all across Seoul began walking away from their homes and jobs. They moved with blank expressions, their eyes empty of any recognition or free will. Children left their schools, workers abandoned their offices, and families separated without a word as they all began marching toward specific locations throughout the city. The Shepherd control codes embedded in Earth's communication networks had finally activated. Every cell phone tower, every internet router, every satellite dish was now broadcasting frequencies that overrode human free will. The people weren't being physically forced to walk. They genuinely believed they wanted to go to these collection points. "We have to stop this," Suna said, her voice carrying harmonics of rage and desperation. "We have to destroy those relay stations before they collect everyone." But finding the relay stations was like hunting for needles in a haystack. The shepherds had been preparing for this moment for 10,000 years, and they had hidden their control devices everywhere. Some were buried deep beneath major cities, others were disguised as normal communication equipment, and a few were even embedded in natural rock formations. Suna's enhanced abilities allowed her to sense the artificial signals, but there were hundreds of them scattered across the globe. Teams of awakened humans and Ascended worked frantically to locate and destroy as many as possible, but it felt like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. In Seoul, Dr. Kim Minho led a strike team into the subway tunnels beneath the city. His partial awakening had given him abilities he barely understood. He could sense the electromagnetic signatures of the hidden relay stations, and his strength was far beyond normal human limits. But he was still learning to control these new powers. There, he pointed to what looked like a normal electrical junction box. "The signal is strongest from that direction." The team moved carefully through the tunnels, but they weren't alone. Controlled humans had somehow known they were coming and were waiting in the darkness. These weren't soldiers or police. They were ordinary people, teachers and shopkeepers and students, but their eyes were completely empty of recognition or mercy. The controlled humans attacked with mindless ferocity, using whatever weapons they could find. They felt no pain, showed no fear, and fought with the single-minded purpose of protecting the Shepherd relay stations. The awakened humans were forced to fight back. But how do you battle your own neighbors and friends who are being controlled? Against their will? We can't hurt them, Minho shouted as he dodged a pipe swing by a controlled businessman. These are innocent people. The Shepherds are using them as shields. The strike team managed to destroy the relay station, but at a terrible cost. Several controlled humans were injured in the fighting, and the awakened humans were emotionally shattered by having to fight their own species. It's not enough, Minho reported back to the command center, his voice heavy with exhaustion and guilt. We destroyed one relay, but 3 more activated in different parts of the city. For every station we take down, they activate 2 more. We're losing this battle. The same scene was playing out in cities around the world. London, New York, Tokyo, Mumbai. Everywhere the Shepherds had hidden their control devices. Teams of awakened humans were fighting desperate battles against their controlled countrymen. But the Shepherds had too many relay stations, and they were activating them faster than the humans could destroy them. Meanwhile, the world's governments were falling apart. Some nations were demanding immediate access to the awakening protocol to create awakened soldiers. Others were condemning the transformation as unnatural and threatening to attack any country that used it. Religious leaders were calling it everything, from divine intervention to demonic possession. The United Nations held emergency sessions, but nothing productive came from them. While diplomats argued about protocols and procedures, millions of people were walking toward Shepherd collection points with blank expressions and empty eyes. As the first massive Shepherd harvester ships began descending toward major population, Center's Keeper G1 made a decision that would change everything. He called together all the world's remaining leaders in a secure quantum communication channel and revealed a truth he had been hiding since their arrival. "We have been lying to you about who we are," he said, his ancient voice heavy with millennia of guilt. "We told you we were humanity's descendants from the future. That was not entirely accurate. Dr. Choi Hyun, who had been coordinating the global response efforts, felt his heart sink. What do you mean? 10,000 years ago, when the Shepherds first arrived at Earth, not all humans were captured and modified," G1 explained. "A small group managed to escape the planet before the genetic modifications were implemented. They fled to distant star systems and spent the next 10 millennia developing technology and abilities that would allow them to return and free their enslaved cousins. The implications hit everyone at once. President Kim Dae-ho was the first to find his voice. You're saying we're the slaves and you're the free humans. You are the descendants of those who were captured and modified," Ji-won confirmed. "We are the descendants of those who escaped. We have spent thousands of years developing the technology to break the genetic locks the Shepherds placed on your species. We came back to free our own people." Dr. Park Suna, listening from her position on the command ship, felt a strange mixture of hope and terror. "So, the awakening process isn't making us into something alien. It's making us back into what humans were supposed to be all along." "Exactly," Ji-won replied. "The abilities you've gained, the expanded consciousness, the extended lifespan, these are normal human traits that were stolen from your ancestors. The Shepherds turned you into a diminished version of your true selves. The revelation changed everything. The awakening process wasn't about becoming something inhuman. It was about becoming truly human for the first time in 10,000 years. The choice facing humanity wasn't between remaining human or becoming alien. It was between remaining slaves or becoming free. But even with this new understanding, the practical problems remained overwhelming. The Shepherd harvester ships were getting closer. More control relays were activating every hour. And humanity was still divided by fear, politics, and religious differences. Time was running out, and the window for mass awakening was closing rapidly. Soon the Shepherds would arrive in force, and then the choice would be taken away from humanity forever. The massive Shepherd harvester ships descended on Earth's major cities like mechanical vultures, their grotesque forms blotting out the sun. In Seoul, New York, and London, enormous tubes extended from the ships toward the ground, ready to vacuum up the controlled humans who were walking in perfect lines toward collection points. Dr. Park Suna, stood on the observation deck of the Ascended command ship, watching her species march toward slavery with blank expressions and empty eyes. Her neural pathways blazed with light beneath her skin as she felt the despair of millions of minds being suppressed by the Shepherd control signals. She had to act now, before it was too late. "Can you connect me to every human mind on Earth?" she asked Keeper G1 urgently. "The quantum communication array can reach everyone simultaneously," he replied, "but the Shepherd interference is getting stronger. You'll have to break through their control signals with pure willpower." Suna nodded and placed her hands on the crystalline communication device. The moment she made contact, her consciousness exploded outward, reaching across the globe to touch the minds of nearly 8 billion people. The effort was overwhelming, like trying to hold a conversation with every person who had ever lived all at the same time. But she pushed through the pain and confusion, her voice carrying across quantum fields to reach every human mind on the planet, from the controlled people walking toward collection points to world leaders hiding in bunkers, to children crying in their parents' arms. "People of Earth," she began, her voice resonating in every language simultaneously. "I know you can hear me, even if the Shepherd signals are trying to block me out. My name is Dr. Park Suna, and I was once just like you, a normal human who thought our limitations were natural." In the streets below, some of the controlled humans stumbled slightly, their blank expressions flickering as her words penetrated the artificial signals clouding their minds. "The beings who are trying to harvest us want you to believe that awakening your true abilities means becoming something inhuman," she continued, pouring every ounce of conviction into her broadcast. "But that's a lie. The transformation doesn't make you less human. It makes you truly human for the first time in 10,000 years. Around the world, people stopped what they were doing to listen. Even those under Shepherd control began to slow their march toward the collection points as her words fought against the alien influence. Our ancestors could live for centuries instead of decades. They could heal with a touch, communicate without words, and shape reality with focused thought. These abilities weren't supernatural. They were as natural to humans as breathing. The Shepherds stole them from us and made us forget what we really were." Dr. Kim Minho, leading a resistance cell in the Seoul subway tunnels, felt tears streaming down his face as he listened to her words. Around him, controlled humans were beginning to blink and look around in confusion as the Shepherd signals weakened. "Right now you have a choice." Suna's voice grew stronger, more urgent. "You can remain as you are, limited, controlled, and enslaved, or you can remember what humanity was always meant to be. The choice isn't between staying human or becoming alien. It's between slavery and freedom." For a moment that seemed to last forever, the entire world held its breath. 8 billion people faced the same decision simultaneously, and for the first time in recorded history, humanity acted as one unified species. The response came not as words, but as a collective quantum resonance that shook the foundations of reality itself. From every continent, every city, every remote village, the answer was the same. We choose freedom. The wave of transformation that swept across Earth was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. It moved faster than light, touching every human being on the planet in the same instant. In laboratories and hospitals, scientists watched in amazement as human DNA rewrote itself, removing the genetic locks that had suppressed their abilities. For millennia, neural pathways blazed to life beneath people's skin as their consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of their physical bodies. Lifespans extended, strength increased, and most importantly, the ability to perceive and manipulate quantum fields awakened in every human mind. The Shepherd control codes shattered like glass windows hit by a sonic boom. The artificial signals that had been suppressing human free will simply couldn't function against minds that were now operating on quantum frequencies the Shepherds had never encountered. In the harvester ships hovering over major cities, alarms began blaring as their intended victims suddenly became something far more dangerous than prey. The controlled humans walking toward collection points stopped, blinked, and looked up at the alien ships with newly awakened awareness and righteous anger. But what happened next surprised even Keeper G1 and the other Ascended. Instead of attacking the shepherd ships with their newfound abilities, the awakened humans did something unprecedented in galactic history. Led by Dr. Park Sooner, whose consciousness had expanded to encompass the entire planet, humanity reached out with their collective psychic abilities and forced the shepherds to experience something they had never felt in their millions of years of conquest: empathy. The alien invaders, who had harvested countless species without ever considering their victims' suffering, were suddenly overwhelmed by the pain and fear they had caused. For the first time in their existence, they felt what it was like to be the prey instead of the predator. The effect was immediate and devastating. Shepherd crews began abandoning their ships, their synthetic minds unable to process the flood of emotions they were experiencing. Some ships simply shut down, their operators paralyzed by the sudden understanding of what they had done to countless civilizations. But the awakened humans didn't leave them to suffer. Instead, they offered something even more unprecedented: forgiveness and the chance to learn. "We don't want to destroy you," Dr. Park Sooner broadcast to the alien fleet. "We want to teach you what we've learned. That true strength comes not from conquering others, but from lifting them up." Many of the shepherd ships fled in terror, unable to comprehend beings who would show mercy to their would-be enslavers. But some remained, their crews begging to understand this strange new emotion that had made their conquest impossible. Months later, Earth had become something unrecognizable. The awakened humans had built their first interstellar vessels using technology that combined ascended knowledge with uniquely human innovation. Instead of preparing for war, they were preparing for the greatest rescue mission in galactic history. Dr. Kim Min-ho stood on the observation deck of humanity's flagship, watching distant stars that he now knew contained enslaved civilizations, waiting for liberation. His neural pathways glowed softly in the starlight, and his consciousness could reach across light years to sense the suffering of species he had never seen. "It's incredible," he said to Dr. Choi Hyun, who was now serving as Earth's first interstellar diplomat. "We can actually feel the pain of enslaved worlds from here. How did we never notice before?" "Because we were slaves ourselves," Choi replied, his own abilities allowing him to sense the emotional resonance of distant civilizations. "Now that we're free, we can't ignore the suffering of others." Keeper Jiwon approached them, preparing to depart with his people to help other worlds begin their own awakening processes. The Ascended had accomplished their mission, but their work was far from over. "What happens now?" Dr. Choi Hyun asked. Jiwon smiled with an expression of pride and hope that had been building for 10,000 years. "Now you become what humanity was always meant to be. Not conquerors seeking to dominate the galaxy, but liberators offering the gift of consciousness to all sentient life." The ascended ships departed, leaving behind a transformed Earth that had become a beacon of hope for countless enslaved species across the galaxy. Humanity had finally claimed its true inheritance, not through conquest or technological supremacy, but through the simple act of choosing compassion over control. As Earth's liberation fleet prepared to depart for distant stars, humanity stepped into its role as the guardians of freedom for all sentient life in the universe.